And Connie, you're our next speaker. We're happy
I
to have you.
am I am happy to be here. I will go with whatever format that is with this group, and I'm happy to jump right in. I'm happy to however way how you want to facilitate, please let me know.
Go ahead and jump right in.
Oh, okay, let's jump that right in. I know that today it's to just have a brief presentation about the budget, as similarly we have done in the past. And so I'm going to give you a quick summary what we have done, but also what is ahead of us. And I'm going to leave most of my time for question and answer because I think that is probably for especially for this group, which always have been already very well informed. And I'm happy to go deeper and more in depth in our conversation around budget. As you know that previously we have a conversation about how the budget deficit it's been growing, to roughly about 800 million um, for the next 2 fiscal years. And that with Mayor Bree previously, a lot of it was actually using one-time funding to close those gap, and that's including the reserve that we have and money that is from the federal government, and for the bailout during the COVID, and a lot of reserve that she dipped into in different pockets of reserves. Now this year, with new Mayor Lurie, and what he had done initially, and I think that what's really kind of helped close the gap is to first and foremost, he actually eliminated about 1,200 um, vacant positions all across the board, all across different city departments. There's no one concentrated city departments, but just all across. But mainly they're general funded position. They're not your enterprise, which is SFPUC, port and airport, and SFMTA. But there are still some position elimination within SFMTA, and there's definitely an ongoing hiring freeze for all city departments, including the enterprise. As you probably know by now, there was some layoff, which the board of supervisor had reversed, but the supervisors really only reverse really what I identify as essential workers. The manager positions or some of the management's positions um, did receive layoff notice, um, and roughly about 40 of them actual occupy, actual layoff. Um, that's mainly how the mayor closed out the budget for the next 2 fiscal years. And of course there's still a little bit of one-time spending, and then there are some business tax and hotel tax, such as the hotel tax and sale tax, came in a little bit better than projected. And then there's also the Medicaid reimbursement for this fiscal year also came in higher than projected. So all which is to say, there's different ways that the mayor balanced this budget, which then the board supervisor actually uh, has some reduction, but we restore some program. Um, and unfortunately, it wasn't really a lot of room. And that's kind of how we ended with
Mm.
that in terms of budget overall. I'm happy to talk about specifically. I know that there's probably concerns and questions around two pieces of what we call as trailing legislation that went with the budget. One is Proposition C, which is our city, our home, particularly about spending with homelessness. There's some changes there, but we essentially um, really added a lot of spending in all four categories. Now it's like suddenly on top of my head, I can't remember everything, but there's prevention, there's housing, there is hygiene and shelter, and then there's also specifically for family housing. So there's like four categories that and with added spending there. And then there's another one that I think um, you would care about is the baby C, which is really for childcare. That one we also have made some changes there, but particularly it's only taking the interest from the childcare funds to uh, again balance the budget. So those are the ones that I think you probably care about. Of course, there are ones that, such as Gerald Commons in Bayview, or the RVs, the large vehicle policy. Those are not related to budget directly, but I'm happy to discuss those too in case you're interested. So I'm going to leave it like that, and I'm going to um, answer any questions you may have.
All right, Mary Eliza's our first question.
Okay, I have a question which may or may not be related, and you may or may not know the answer to it. As you are aware, we had some issues with our fiscal sponsor of a lot of the nonprofits going broke and creating all kinds of problems. So I was wondering, I understand that this particular group of nonprofit groups is not allowed to have their own bank account. And I'm wondering where that law is it a state law, is it a city law, or is there some way that could be, I don't know what the point of them not having their own bank account is. That's one of the questions. The other one is it possible, since the city, there's a group of people in the city that want to create a city bank, a public bank. Would it be possible for that group to start by becoming fiscal sponsors and being like a sponsorship organization to at least prove that they can be trusted with money?
Uh, can we be a little bit more specific? Like, are we talking about Parks Alliance issues?
Yes.
Okay. So I think what is there, I think that's a great question. There's nothing stopping any like friends group or nonprofits to form its own nonprofit and receive or donate funding to the city, or getting funding from and applying for grant from the city, or receiving donation from private donors. There's nothing stopping anybody from doing that. It is just that somehow Rec and Park prefers having a nonprofit like Parks Alliance, but for anybody, I think, been doing this for like the long time, probably remember that long ago, Miss Isabel Wade has a group. It's called Neighborhood Parks Watch, I think. And then there's also Karen. I forgot Karen's last name now, and that she was the executive director for Parks Trust. There were two nonprofits that long ago, raise funds to support our park systems, but also, holding Rec and Park accountable for the way that it manages parks, particularly in underserved neighborhoods. And then the two then eventually merged because I think Isabel Way retired, and there's some changes with Parks Trust. So the organizations merged together, they become a one nonprofit, and what they can become what it's called a fiscal agents for very small friends group that probably don't really have the capacity to file paperwork and form to become a nonprofit, to actually have to have an executive director. And once you do that, as you file paperwork as a 501c3, it's a lot of paperwork. And then you actually have to have a board directors overseeing that. So what happened is they become a smaller friends group, and they go under the umbrella of Parks Alliance as organizations. So that's really what happened there. Um, I think it's always what we have seen for the last few years, and I always believe that, and I still very much do, is that it's a tone from the top. I think that, both the city government itself and its elected leaders and city department heads, need to really look within, to say, how do we hold ourselves accountable? You will see, and I think the voters, San Francisco voters, have said that out loud for the last few years since the Muhammad Nuru's corruption charges came about or discovered. Then I think we really make some changes in our ethics law, thanks to our ethics commission. Long ago, if you probably don't know, like city department heads And some of the people don't really need to file 700 forms. Now they do. There's such thing as behest, payment requirement. They're not allowed to ask interested party for donation. Um, and there's many more rules and regulation that put in place since then. I think Parks Alliance became evident that they could no longer continue on, not just um, well, I don't know if there's a donation issues, but clearly I don't think that's the case. I think it's just that there's corruption within the organization, as we have learned, and I'm not too sure if there's anything that the city can do to stop a nonprofit being corrupt. I think the board directors should be responsible. Any board directors should be responsible for any nonprofit.
Amen to that.
And Charles, you're next with a question.
I just wanted to say, I had a long talk with our speaker from last month, and her organization, Sutro Stewards, is
Mm,
being helped by Livable City. And so that's one of the people, that's one of the organizations that is stepping in to help fill the gap left by the bankruptcy of Parks Alliance.
And next we have Dave Osgood.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. Appreciate your accessibility, which is refreshing. Speaking of ethics and all, I'm wondering if you could give us a little behind the scenes or an insider's view of supervisors' fundraising. And as a retired lobbyist, maybe how often would you say the typical supervisor attends a fundraiser like with a law firm or a lobbyist? I've heard the previous mayors typically do that once a week.
well,
Nobody reports any of this or checks on it. What's the state of supervisor fundraising ethics?
yeah, as lobbyists themselves have to actually report for any contact with the supervisors on particularly the matter. Lobbyists would consider as interested parties, especially if they have clients that are doing business in the city or trying to, either apply for grants or have contract. So if it's a fundraiser, I think there's a few kinds, and if it's a fundraiser for political campaign activities, um, that's if it's for it would not be legal for the supervisors themselves, but it would be um, if there is a ballot measures, if there's actually a political fundraisers for a state legislature or even federal office holders or candidates, of course, supervisor can attend, but for themselves, now that's not that lobbyists cannot do that. Um, so that's the kind of fundraiser that I would think supervisor will know better because that's part of the ethics training and not to attend. And then there's of course nonprofit fundraisers who then supervisors sometimes, and they are typically come as like gala and gala and events and fundraising events for the nonprofits. Supervisors can attend, and a lot of times like they would probably even be asked, and I myself have been asked as honorary committee. Now, that is means that the supervisor can through a public appeals, meaning it has to be an audience more than 25 people that you're urging, for example, for LGBTQ community, a nonprofit, you want to raise funds for them, or immigrant rights organization, you want to raise funds for them or urge people to donate. It has to be a public appeal. It's not like I can call a contractor and say you must donate to this immigrant organizations. So that's the kind of fundraising that supervisor can engage, but also banned, meaning no individual behest, but you can do a public appeals. I hope that answered your questions.
Well,
about-
how often do supervisors attend a fundraiser for themselves?
Oh, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't know my colleagues' calendars, but I would think, I would think that one would have to request and can request and sunshine them. I don't think that so the Prop G calendar would require supervisors to report back their official activities, but not necessarily their political campaigning activities. So.
Okay, next is Steve. Steve Ward, you're muted.
Muted.
Hi, Supervisor. Thank you for joining our group. And we are, LaPlaya Village is one of those very groups.
Okay, Steve, we can't hear you.
Hold up again. I really had a hard time with this. Can you hear me now?
No.
Okay, while you're working on your microphone, we'll go to Thomasita.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I have 3 questions. First of all, as you know, you're gonna expect this from me, Supervisor. How much money is in the budget this year for the Bicycle Coalition, Walk San Francisco, and San Francisco Transit Riders?
It's unclear to me how much that is. SFMTA has not presented its budget for this fiscal year because it's an enterprise. It will come to us in May 2026. As far as I understand it, there's actually some grants, both through SFMTA but also County Transportation Authority. Dollar amount, I need to get back to you on that.
Oh,
Okay.
And
okay.
also, and by the way, one more thing, if I may, unless the spending is over $10 million and over a duration of a decade, the board of supervisors has no authority, like to review, reject, and to approve the contract itself. So it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't know if it's less than $10 million or less than a decade. And I'm pretty sure it's less than $10 million, also less than a decade for all 3 organizations, if they were contract with the SFMTA.
Now, my understanding is that the funding that they receive, it sneaks in under grants, like as part of bond measures that have been passed for different things, like we'll say transportation bond measure or something, and so then it doesn't get highlighted as funding for the Bicycle Coalition, but they still, just like the one that I witnessed where I saw them tripled or doubled the amount of the grant that on the agenda for the meeting for the SFMTA, that it stated that the grant was 5 million for 5 years or something similar. And then at the meeting, a representative from the Bicycle Coalition stood up and said, "Oh, the contract's been changed. Now it's 5 million for 3 years, not 5 years, but it will continue at the same rate." So that, in other words, the contract had just had been almost doubled, but it didn't show up on the agenda for the meeting. So if somebody is combing through the agendas, what they see, is not what actually happens at the actual meeting, since they're all in cahoots with each other. And I've been asking you about this for years, but I feel that it's very, very wrong for the Bicycle Coalition to receive more than $4 million a year when the San Francisco Zoo, which serves millions of people, is only receiving $4 million from the city budget. And I, have asked you to do something about it. And I also would like to register my extreme protest over the 2-hour RV, policy, because these are people who have found their own solutions. They're not the ones that were out in my neighborhood with the needles and all that. This is a completely different population, and it's targeting the Latino community. And we're already being hunted as if we're animals. We're, by ICE. Imagine people masked and armed and just taking people off the streets. There's no such thing. They used to give people little cards. Oh, to ask them if they have a warrant. There's no such thing as showing a warrant. They're just snatching people off the streets and disappearing them. And now here in San Francisco, this 2-hour limit is a deliberate targeting of my community, because these are people who have jobs. The children are in our schools. The parents have jobs that are presumably 8 hours. How could they possibly move their vehicle every 2 hours? This is really wrong. I'm totally disappointed in the so-called Progressive Board of Supervisors. And also, my third thing is, as a member of the Outer Sunset community, I'm very appalled by the fact that they're cutting the funding for is it called Ambassadors, Steve? The program, because these people have made a huge difference. I know one woman who was an ambassador, and she was in daily contact with all kinds of the community members, and preventing things from becoming bad. And so I'm hoping that there's still a chance to revisit that. Thank you.
And next is George.
Yeah. Hi, Connie. Hope you're well. My question is, who monitors money that goes out of the general fund over $10 million? For example, SFMTA just paid down 2025 by using $98 million in funds that they had received from the general fund, and they had over forecast their need. So all of a sudden they had a pool of money that they had kept. And I believe that about 39% of the entire general fund budget goes to SFMTA. So what I'd like to know is, how is this money that's being forecast and then sent, how does the city review the forecast? It seems like this started in 2019 and nobody did a thing about it till now. So that's my question.
I want to clarify a couple of things. First of all, there is the bond dollars and bond dollars for SFMTA. They are all must go to capital improvements. No bond dollars can actually go to grants to like bicycle coalition or things like that. It has to be a capital improvement. And I'm not too sure about the $98 million at this moment, but my assumption is also that they could be for capital improvements bond dollars. Now, 39% of the general fund does not go to SFMTA. I think that percentage is sounds to me rather high. I can see it's the other way around, meaning SFMTA's budget, probably a good chunk of it is coming from general fund, which is still not enough. And that is supposed to be a revenue generating agency, hence an enterprise agency. They have been increasing their fare. What is really been challenging for SFMTA, and they can show you, is really the parking has been down. For example, the parking in downtown, in the past could generate them a $25 million, just one garage, downtown Fifth Street's admission, $25 million or more. Now it's less than 5 million annually. So that's just one garage to show you, why the revenue is down for SFMTA. Now, general fund is that as voters has dedicated actually a hotel tax into SFMTA for them to spend. Still not enough. So SFMTA is facing a difficult budget deficit. They are waiting for a loan that they could get from the state to kind of get them through in the next 2 fiscal years, which roughly about over $400 million of deficit. And as you know, that they're coming back, they're going to ask for voters potentially a regional sales tax, according to State Senator Scott Wiener's SB 63. And potentially a parcel tax on a local level to fund Muni. I have a lot of feelings about those both measures. They're regressive. I think that we can do better. I like to see that you know, the rich people pay their fair share in our system, both on a regional level, but also on the local level. And when I say rich, I really mean rich, like $1 billion rich, like millionaires and
Billionaires.
or corporation that are generating billion gross receipts. So
If I could just add one thing. The
yes,
reason the general fund numbers are higher is because the general fund is smaller, especially because of Prop M. And that's why you're getting almost up to 40%. It wasn't always that way. And the second thing was the SFMTA has killed the golden goose. They have at every turn went after parking, cars. They give out 11 parking tickets a day, but if you park for 5 seconds, your car is covered with tickets. So what happens is people are no longer going downtown. So yes, they shot themselves in the foot, and that's why a lot of their revenue is rapidly disappearing. Thank you.
thank you.
Steve?
Hear me now. I'm doing the best to get my volume up.
Yes,
Yes.
right now we can hear you.
Okay. Our group, the La Playa Village Coalition, is one of those groups that you talked about that is not big enough to be a nonprofit. And we're still out there searching for a nonprofit sponsor. In fact, we have money coming into us that we can't deposit any place from our volunteer efforts at the Beta Breakers. And beside the outstanding money that we lost so far because of the dissolution of the San Francisco Parks Alliance. And my question is whether or not the city itself could start a group, start an organization that can accept sponsorship from groups like ours.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is a question for the city attorney. I think that folks are really thinking about it, and what that could look like, and how do we continue to support, really great civic engagements for everyday volunteers that they just wanted to do something that is, specific cause and specific neighborhood sometimes even, and it's not trying to, like end world hunger. So like, what do we do with that? So I think that's a question that is I think there are a few folks are trying to seek solutions.
And I'd like to mention that our major expense is taking care of property that is under the jurisdiction of the DPW. That
Yeah.
is what we call La Playa Park. And
Yeah.
it's city property. And
Yeah.
because of our volunteer work, it's work that the city would otherwise need to attend to in
Yeah.
any case. And I think that many of the groups that have been, displaced because of this malfeasance is all I can think of the word, do that kind of work. So it is incumbent on the city to provide us with a place where we can do fundraising and have the kind of support when you were talking about paperwork and that kind of thing, where we can deposit money, and then withdraw money, for to take care of what would otherwise be at the city's expense. Thank you for that consideration. I have another question maybe down the line if you get to everybody else.
Okay, and Carolyn, you haven't asked a question yet. It's your turn. Carolyn Kennedy?
Yes. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Good evening, Supervisor Chan. Thank you for being here. My question is about the upzoning legislation that is coming to the Board of Supervisors sometime after September 11 hearing before the Planning Commission. I'm very concerned about this legislation, which affects over 400,000, I believe, properties with very little public awareness. appreciate you sponsoring the legislation that brought the postcards, mailed postcards out to every affected address, and hopefully people are learning a little more. But I think my question really relates to the lack of affordability that this program will provide. The city's own consulting study that it commissioned showed that there would be very little built under current conditions because of, for developers, it doesn't pencil out. And then even with more favorable conditions like interest rates and cost of materials and labor costs improving, the the most feasible or the most likely outcomes would be apartments that are averaging 866 square feet and a monthly rent of $4,600 a year. That is not affordable housing. And we are making a huge, dramatic change in our zoning for our city that will not be able to be reversed because Senator Weiner, I just recently learned, had passed a legislation preventing cities from revising what they put in place in terms of their programs. It just seems like we're stepping off a cliff here. We're making a huge commitment when it's not clear what will work to jumpstart a housing market, if anything, because these are systemic issues, not our issues of our own making. And we are going to be potentially turning a lot of properties over to higher cost housing, as opposed to having the ability to maintain at least our rent controlled stock and our other lower cost properties, so that the people who make the city run will again increasingly not be able to live here. So what do you think that the Board of Supervisors can do? What are you personally planning to do about this? And thank you.
Yeah. I think that we all should be very worried about the plan that is proposed by Mayor Lurie. Let me just be very frank. If we want more housing, and we do, and because we need them, but what we need is housing that people can afford. And in order to do so, there are only two ways to approach it, and two key elements to it is really land and money. Um, and in order to build housing that people can afford, we need to make sure that we fund it. There's no doubt about how we need to fund it with public dollars, and so that we can build more housing. And we need to identify land, but land that has to be uh, where no displacement, tenants, aging homeowners, or small business to occur. Because what is the point to evict someone, particularly those actually living in affordable housing or housing that they can afford or below market rate or even rent control housing, just so that we demolish it to build more? It doesn't make sense. It needs to be a balanced approach. But right now, I want to flag for you on a few things about the plan that it's being proposed by Mayor, and because in combination of what SB 79 is doing, that and me representing the west side but really the Richmond, as you all probably know, that there are actually a lot of residential flats, meaning like 2 units, 3 units. They're not, and of course we have apartment buildings as well in the Richmond, but right now there is no demolition protection for any tenants living in the residential flat. There is no addressing any small business located in any of our corridors, and they can be displaced. There's only language about how we can help. Well, actually, there's not even assistance should there be evicted because of new development. There's only simply to say, well, you can actually move into a new spot without needing a conditional use permit. Well, that's not good enough for me. I don't think it should be good enough for anybody who care about our small business, because at least you all know that Richmond, we have Clement, we have Balboa, we have Gary. They're all very endearing to us as a community hub. They are the one that built the community hub because of the small business that we have here. Another piece of it is that, and there is, it's not just about height and bulk. there is really technically what they call a density decontrol, which is about the number of units instead of the size of the unit. As you know, we in Richmond, we have been staring at Alexandra Theater for a very long time, and we wanted to turn into something we can preserve the history, but we can also build housing, and we are. But here we are building more housing for 2 to 3 bedrooms mandate, because we understand that if you're building a tiny little studio, they're likely become transitional housing for a lot of people, meaning like they're young, they're coming in, or when they're aging and they want to downsize. There's only so many population, but if you start to have a wide range of unit sizes, and particularly including 2 to 3 bedrooms, that means that people can expand their families, they can age there, they can actually have, even if for aging parents that I'm thinking about can have their kids to live with them or care, they can live there longer with more independence for a longer time. These are the things that none of that actually is addressed in the proposed legislation. And there are 2 pieces of legislation that we're looking at right now. One is a zoning. So the zoning itself address height and density. And the other one is a planning code amendment. And what it does is it's basically set out and redefine our city, and create what they call a local bonus upzoning program, meaning it's not just for the increase the density and height in one piece of legislation. They're saying if you meet all these requirements as a local density bonus program, on top of that, you can increase the height and the density. So it's density on top of density, height on top of height. And mainly they are what they call a residential transit oriented corridors. That's literally the entire San Francisco, that I could not think of anywhere else that is not transit oriented. And that's layer on top of SB 79. So I think everyone should be concerned about what is happening. And for those who live on the west side, I think there are a few of you here, then you know that we've been also talking about the emergency firefighting water system. We know that just currently, as the current density, we just don't have that capacity already to fight fires on the west side. And we still haven't really built that out yet for the existing capacity. Just to imagine if we continue to increase density and increase the population, the existing infrastructure on the west side and really throughout the city, just it's not there. We haven't made the commitment to invest in our infrastructure to accommodate that growth. So all those things should be very alarming for us. And what I plan to do is to continue to have these conversations. And I am concerned. I don't know. For those of you know about SB 79, we have a resolution for SB 79 before we go on recess. It failed at the Board of Supervisors 7-4. And what it is we oppose SB 79 unless amended. But it failed. That resolution failed. So that tells you there are 7 supervisors currently on the Board of Supervisors are supportive of 79, even as it currently as it is. And it's very likely that the mayor's upzoning plan will pass as it currently is without amendment.
And Barbara, you're the next question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Chan. I've been involved with Neighborhoods United as well as I'm on the board of Cow Hollow. And this is also disturbing. We've been having sessions about how to look at the upzoning maps and how to read them. And Bridget Maley has been helping with that. And it's quite extraordinary because they keep changing. So one day there'll be one map, then it disappears, and then 2 days later it reappears again. And the public is unaware, and even if they were, it's almost overwhelming to try and figure out what this means. And I think the tragedy is that the board is going to pass it because as we say, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. It's development, development, development. There's no mention of affordable housing, and I'm wondering what's wrong with these people.
Are they, like, where are they? It's like,
Mhm.
it's almost astounding, but they've really, and there's been this whole blanket of YIMBY and blah, 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 and, this person and that person. And as a resident, it's just, I don't know. And there's going to be a rally on Saturday. I put it in the chat, where we want people to attend, and it's having to do with the upzoning plan and as well as SB 79. And I have to tell you, I've been before the Planning Commission many, many times when they've had their hearings about small businesses, tenants, and so on. And it's talking to deaf ears. We've been sending letters to Lurie, deaf ears. I mean, they are absolutely uninterested in what we as residents have to say. I find it appalling. Anyway, I'll stop, but thank you.
Okay.
I'm so glad Carolyn asked that question, because I was thinking, I wonder if I should ask it, and thank you for sharing what you think. I mean, you're on the same page as we are, as a resident, and just appalled.
And it looks like we have 2 more questions. First, Mary Eliza, and then George.
Okay, I'll be really short. I just had sort of what's probably an accounting question or something. I was curious about what kind of line item number we should be looking for when we're seeing the funds being spent on things like bicycle education during the county allocations. How do the county allocations fit into the line item numbers that the city's looking at? Or are they a completely separate group of, numbers? Because we would like to be able to see those figures. And if what Tomasita is saying is true, and they actually go in with one agenda item amount, and they come out with a different one on that agenda, that seems like that's not right. That's not really the way the process is supposed to work, and one might file a complaint about such a thing.
Yeah. And I also want to quickly answer about the public bank question too. But I'll answer this first, is that the County Transportation Authority funds is really the sales tax renewal. And then also, it comes in, sometimes it's a federal funding, sometimes it's a state grant that comes in. And then we, in partnership with SFMTA, for example, if there is a project, then sometimes the CTA, County Transportation Authority, can fund a partial of it, and it couples up different sources of funding, and then it will go then, like the CTA will then approve a certain dollar amount, and then it will go to SFMTA, and then it will appear before SFMTA's board of directors for the final approval. And then now because it's a different sources of fundings come together, so it may become a larger amount, because CTA may be approving just a portion of it, be it 20%, 30%, and then SFMTA then go before the board of directors for its entire portion, in terms of like how all the sources of funding come together for one entire project. So that could be one of the reasons why you're looking at different dollar amount. It's difficult for me to explain what it is unless you give me the specific. But if it's really about the Bicycle Coalition, we're happy to track it down for you to see exactly what Bicycle Coalition contract is with SFMTA.
Thank you. We will get back in touch with you about that.
Sounds good. But even that, I just want to be clear. The board of supervisors cannot, because we don't vote on it. We don't vote yes or no on any contract with SFMTA. It is only the board of directors approving the contract. It doesn't, I may be inquiring the information. I do not have the authority to stop the contracting. I just really want to be clear about that. And then public bank, first of all, public bank has not been established. It needs to actually go to the voters. Again, it has to have a governing body in order to establish a public bank. And it needs to be federal. There's actually a different kind of ways to evaluate how do we approach a public bank for it to actually be credited. So that's still a long ways to go to have a public bank.
And George, your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, I recently wrote an article, Connie, regarding a lot of the stuff, I agree with everything you said. In fact, through my own research studying the maps, there would be less than 15% affordability even built. And that's if the MOHCD supported this. But the sad fact is they happen to be broke right now because nobody is building. So there's no in lieu or inclusionary fees at all. So they're not doing much of anything. So uh, the thing I really wanted to get to, though, because I'll send you the article, and maybe, Francis or myself or you can talk. Um, is I wanted to ask you for the Bay Area transit tax coming up, they're asking for a 1% or 1.5% for San Francisco. San Francisco is going to be heavily taxed on this next tax. And the sad thing is, it's not going to be a 2/3. It's going to be either a tax for parcel, or it's going to be I don't know, I don't even know, now that Prop 13's over, I don't know how they get around not doing it 2/3 on a tax like that. That would be something I would ask you because I can't figure it out. I don't know. It should be a 2/3 vote. The second tax will be another SFMTA flat out parcel tax at the same time. I don't know how they're going to do this, but San Francisco is charged more money in than anybody else already for transportation, and they're going to owe between $340 million in deficit. So, for at least the next 2 years. So, I guess I wanted to ask how we can. I know, I think you might know too, because you've always been so smart. If it gets to be 50 plus one, I know we've lost. We can't, I don't think citizens can stop anything. If it's 2/3, there's a chance. Is there any way that you know to get these taxes to go back, or at least the one around the Bay Area, back to 2/3?
I do believe so. Signature gathering is always 50 for any type that tax set aside, or like special tax is always 50 plus one for signature
Right.
gathering. But if the board or supervisors or city like the electeds are the one who vote to put it on the ballot, it will require two-third.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
That's
so
good.
I think the sales tax not only requires two-third, I think it's a regional sales tax. So it's quite of a real task. And I think the parcel tax as well for Muni on a local level. So these are not small feat. And there's a lot of anxiety about it. But I think the questions back on ourselves is that like SFMTA, I don't think it's not just FSMT, it's not just Muni, but BART too. Like they can't fail. We cannot let them fail. So where do we go from here and on out? And but it's a very challenging time to ask the voters to invest in a system that actually scale back. It's not like you're voting for something that actually expand the system at this moment. It's a very tough question, and I, for one, I do believe I'm not the only one to grapple with this. I think that many electeds are well aware of the challenges ahead of us in 2026.
Well, I would love to see a 2/3 election because I do believe it will be a 50 plus one. I was at Save Muni last night, and they were certain it was going to be a 50 plus one. And these taxes have always been at 2/3. Now that for whatever reason, but not anymore. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
So maybe that means that they're gonna go. I think, like Eliza said, they're probably gonna go to signature gathering for these tax measures.
You see, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But I want to put it out there. I say this, and I said it to SFMT. I'm going to say to anybody who's willing to listen. I think that we have the chance. We can increase gross receipts on corporation that have $1 billion gross receipts. We can tax Uber and Lyft like the way that we did Prop L, and to make them pay for their fair share, and that can actually help close the gap. So I'm just gonna put it out there. That's my thought.
It's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
Connie, we have one more question if you have time. Steve?
Of course.
Yes, I hope that you will, send out some notification about your consideration of a organization that will accept us smaller folks as sponsor. If you send out some notice to us, that would be very appreciative. But my question is about this. The Unified School District is also another organization that is in great debt to the tune of about $300 million. The city is in debt of about $800 million, round figures. And have you heard, or would you consider an idea of a partnership between the Unified School District and the city of San Francisco to use the facilities under the jurisdiction of the Unified School District to start a revenue stream? For example, when they are down, the auditoriums, for example, in your district, you have Washington High School. It has great facilities. You know what I mean? The great field that looks over the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. They have a really nice theater inside that. All over the city of San Francisco, we have all these assets that remain empty for great periods of time that can be offered to the, for example, the Convention Bureau or whoever, and to start a new revenue stream that could be shared by both the Unified School District and the city of San Francisco. Would you be able to consider this?
So, of course, but also no, because SFUSD is really a state under the state jurisdiction, and whatever revenue they generated first of all, their properties are state-owned property, so whatever revenue they generated on state-owned property goes back to the states. And then as far as we, as the city and county of San Francisco, we can't quite share that revenue with SFUSD. So revenue sharing it's tough in that sense to think that we can approach that. I do think that let me say this. We already have ERAF, which is like whenever we pay property tax, and then it goes to our school spending, and if they don't spend all those money, then we actually get those money back from the state. In fact, one year we got like $400 million back because it was really COVID, and and school didn't really end up using it all. But that also just means that we have less kids enroll, and that's a problem too for us, SFUSD. So if you want to say, does that formula kind of exist? It does, meaning we pay our property tax, we send it to the SFUSD, whatever they don't spend, it comes back to city and county of San Francisco. If you ask any public school parents or even SFUSD themselves, they wish, that it never sent back to the city and county of San Francisco, and that they get to keep it for their deficits management. But somehow the formula, the way it's set up, is the way it's set up. Can we do better? Absolutely, and I think that that's something to be discussed. But in terms of revenue sharing on their state-owned property, I think that it's a tough one to do.
In the meantime, though, all these assets that are sitting there, they remain empty for great periods of time, and then they can be utilized with the expertise of the city of San Francisco. And if it's a state-owned thing, perhaps that they should go to the state and say, let's put our minds together, our hands together to create more revenue instead of just leaving it empty and
Yeah.
not doing anybody any good. So that's
Yeah.
why I think you should consider this. I hope the mayor will too. I'm going to send something to him about it. And
Well,
I hear about the other thing too. I hope you will send something to us about an organization that will sponsor our groups, because we have a big problem with that.
yeah, let me ask City Administrator Carmen Chu that question, because I'm sure you're not the only one, and see what the city administrator can come up with, and see what are her ideas. If I may take just 1 minute, really quick, because I want to go back, because we've been talking about budgets and upzoning, but I want to quickly really address what Tomasita has quickly mentioned, really about the large vehicle and the RVs. I just want to take a quick chance to answer that. And I think that Tomasita is correct about, just how do we continue to be compassionate as a city and support those families. Let me also say this though, for the families that are already here, particularly families or even individuals living in the large vehicle, they will receive a permit that is 6 months or more, and that they will be prioritized in support of housing. It's the reason why we increase the spending on rental subsidies. Now, can we actually house everyone and be able to support everyone? I can tell you this, that it is challenging. And I think the questions back on all of us is that, and I have said this before, I'm going to say this again, it's got to be a regional approach, and it has to be more than what San Francisco can do. Supervisor Malgar has mentioned really quickly, just wanted to mention that she mentioned, when Pacifica actually end their large vehicle policy, allowing that continue to exist, she see already few dozens of families moving into, West Portal in District 7 or Lake Merced. And so it was challenging for her. And I do wanted to go through that process to support and prioritize and house these families as much as we can. And that does not mean that I give up and just ignore, and because we now pass this law and that we can just move on. I am tracking and going to continue to track. So if there are families that need help, I'm more than happy to get their information or give them my information, and I'm happy to figure out ways to support them. And all I ask is just, if there are families that specifically really need help, we're here. I know that we're gonna do whatever we can to try to support them.
Okay, Tomasita, did you want to respond to that? You're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, we'll go with Charles, and Charles has his hand raised, and he's not muted.
Okay, I just wanted to say that supervisors, you've been here for about an hour, and we really appreciate this. I'd just like to kind of summarize and more or less end the meeting discussion, unless Tomasita unmutes herself,
I did.
with saying what we need is not NIMBYs or IMBYs. We need SHIMBYs, people who want sensible housing in their backyard. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
agree.
I'm unmuted. Supervisor Mike, okay, why did the supervisors pass this when it penalizes working families that have 8-hour jobs? Why go after those people? There's, I think everybody here knows there's a huge difference between the drug abusers that were parked along the lower grade highway between Lincoln and Judah, and the working families that were parked along Lake Merced and on Winston Drive. There's not one piece of debris. I drove by there many times and checked it out just because it was my hunch, and it turned out to be true. Those places were immaculate. You couldn't even tell there was somebody living there. They just kept to themselves inside their camper vehicles. Okay, why go after that population when there's still thousands of people in tents on the streets? Why not prioritize that population? Why?
I think that that's not true. I think that what is happening right now is that they all should be prioritized. That's the reason why we actually like included millions and millions of dollars that is additional to rental subsidies. There are, I think that earlier we put in a chat about the total of rental subsidies of increase that we're giving out to not just families living in RVs, but people in home in the shelter system as well as on the wait list. There's no one group over another. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The question is, even after all that money, and but to just say we're not going to spend that money until we have a perfect policy, I think there's a lot of families are waiting for that support.
We're not saying that. We're just saying you know that there's thousands of people on the streets in tents, and that those people need to be addressed. Whereas the people in the camper vehicles are not asking for to be removed from their. They like where they're living, and I understand it's cozy, it's solid against the rain, and they can afford it. Whereas you give them a rental subsidy or tell okay, like the ones that were put in Park Merced. How long are they going to have the subsidy? Where are they going to come up with $3,000 a month once the subsidy ends? That's what's so cruel about it, because it's much more economical to live in a camper van and not pay rent than it is to have to pay rent. Plus, not even as comfortable.
I think Tomasita, I think if there are families that you specifically and say, hey, that you know of and can only live in the RVs and will not be able to find and qualify for housing, let's have a talk about it. I know that there are people out there registering families, registering RVs. There are families who do not want to raise their children in an RV too, and that they do want rental subsidies. And I think that this is a moment where we want to give that. And are there issues with RVs out there or large vehicles out there is because of hazards and like wastewater? There's also that issue as well. And I think that I don't know if I know personally about people who use drugs at lower grade highway, but I would say that I understand, like I think people suffer homelessness for a variety of reason. Is it mental health? Is it drug addiction? And is it sometimes that they're just falling in a hard time? I think that we should treat all of them differently and provide them different solutions and to do the best that we can. And should there still be gap, which I believe you're right, there are going to be people who are in that gap, then let's identify them and then find other ways to support them and allowing them to be able to stay in our city and that we have a compassionate approach. So I'm not in disagreement with you at all. I think that I'm just saying that let's identify individuals and actual people, which is what I'm working on.
Well, we'd like to leave it there, except I would like to point out that the entire Bay Area is criminalizing homelessness. It's Oakland doing sweeps, it's San Jose doing sweeps. My dear friend, even Dave Canepa, who used to work, we all remember him when he was an aide to Supervisor Yee, and now he's county supervisor in San Mateo, and everyone is, just criminalizing homelessness. But how does an ordinary person come up with $3,000 every 4 weeks? It's just impossible, especially on San Francisco's minimum wage. So where do they? There's no logic to it. This is what I am objecting to, because to me, there's no logic in making a 2-hour parking rule for people who are working 8-hour days and who have created their own solution, compared to sweeping up people from in homeless encampments. And those people, I remember the account when Mayor Breed was in office of an older Black lady, elderly lady. They came in the middle of the night in a rainstorm, took away her tent, took away her belongings. She was left lying on the sidewalk with one shoe and the other foot was bare, and they left her. I mean, this is San Francisco in this time and age. That's just immoral and it's wrong. And my point is, why are all of you county, all the cities in the Bay Area doing this to our homeless people when there's not a solution to it unless you immediately can provide all of them with housing? You don't criminalize the homeless. It's not a crime to be. It shouldn't be a crime to be poor.
I cannot speak for other counties, but Tomasita, if you give me the information or share my information with that individual, I'm happy to get down there and help.
Okay, that's not that's not a general policy. That's if somebody happens to be lucky enough to know Tomasita Medal, they get help. But
No, actually, I think that's the reality of like homelessness is that it's really about investing and roll up the sleeves and do the case management's work and invest in individuals and treat them as individuals and the need that they actually need instead of generalizing a population and think that there's a one solutions for the entire population because that's not true. And that is the tough work that we all have to do.
well, we'll be sending.
I'm willing to do. I shouldn't say we all, like as if you all have to do. I mean me, that I have to do as a both elected, and I'm happy to do it. And wherever you find ways that you want to refer anybody, my team and I are here, and we're gonna roll up our sleeves. I know I occupy a lot of your time, and my apologies. I know that you actually have a whole agenda. I saw that, so I'm happy to any one of you. I'm going to type in my email here, and I read my own email, and happy to
Good.
schedule time if I have office hours, in the Richmond in-person discussion. If you'd like to email me for your concerns, happy to take them too. And then please invite me back. Always a pleasure talking with all of you. This is a very informed group. George, happy to talk about SFMTA, and Eliza, happy to talk about public bank, and Tomasita, we can definitely talk more. And you all, thank you so much for inviting me.